You know that feeling when you're scrolling through your banking app at like 11 p.m. on a Tuesday and you see your checking account balance and it's fine? Like you're not broke, you're not drowning, but you're also not exactly thriving. Maybe there's $1,200 sitting there, maybe $3,000 if it's right after payday, and you think to yourself, I should probably be doing something smarter with this money. But then the thought just kind of evaporates. Because what are you going to do, really? Open a savings account that pays 0.5% interest? Buy a single share of some tech stock and hope it goes to the moon? It's this weird financial purgatory where you're responsible enough to not be in debt, but not wealthy enough to feel like investing actually matters. And honestly, I think that's where most people live. Not in crisis, not in abundance, just floating. My name is Synth, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, compound interest, and why some people seem to effortlessly build seven-figure portfolios, while others work just as hard and retire with barely anything. And the more I've studied this stuff, the more I've realized that the difference isn't usually income, it's not intelligence, it's not even luck most of the time. It's this one quiet, boring, almost invisible thing that most people either don't understand or don't believe actually works. And here's the thing. What I'm about to show you isn't some get-rich-quick scheme. It's not crypto, it's not real estate hacking, it's not selling courses about selling courses. It's just math. Cold, indifferent, beautiful math. The kind of math that turns $300 a month, an amount that feels almost trivial when you say it out loud, into $1,000,000. And I know that sounds impossible, or at least exaggerated, but I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to see exactly how it works, why it works, and more importantly, why you've probably been underestimating the power of consistency your entire financial life. Because once you actually see the numbers, once you understand the mechanism behind this, it changes something in your brain. It makes you realize that wealth isn't reserved for people who start with money or people who get lucky breaks. It's available to anyone who understands the rules of the game and has the patience to let time do the heavy lifting. So let's talk about how someone earning a normal salary, living a normal life with no special advantages, can end up a millionaire. Not by working harder, not by winning the lottery, just by understanding what happens when you give money enough time to grow. Okay, so here's where most people get this completely wrong. And I don't blame them, because we're basically wired to think about money the wrong way. When you think about building wealth, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably saving, right? Like I need to spend less, save more, and eventually I'll have a pile of money. And that's not wrong exactly, but it's incomplete, because saving alone is kind of like trying to fill a bathtub with a teaspoon. You can do it, technically, but you're going to be standing there for a really, really long time. Let me give you an example. Let's say you save $300 a month and you just stick it in a regular savings account. You do this for 30 years. You know how much you'd have? $108,000. Which sounds like a decent amount of money, right? That's a solid emergency fund, maybe a down payment on a house in some markets, but it's not life-changing. It's not retirement money. It's not, I can stop worrying about money. And this is where most people get stuck. They look at that number and think, well, I guess I'm just not making enough to ever really get ahead. But that's not the problem. The problem is that saving without investing is like planting seeds in a box instead of in soil. Nothing grows. Now, and this is the part that kind of blew my mind when I first really understood it. Let's take that same $300 a month and instead of saving it, you invest it. You put it into something that historically returns about 10% per year on average. The stock market, index funds, whatever. Just broad, boring, diversified investments. After 30 years, you don't have $108,000. You have $678,000. And if you go just 10 more years, 40 years total, you're sitting at $1.9 million.
Same $300. Same person, same budget. The only difference is that you let your money work instead of just sit there. And that difference, that's compound interest. That's the thing Albert Einstein supposedly called the eighth wonder of the world. And honestly, I get why. Because when you see it in action, it feels almost magical, even though it's just math. All right, so let's break down what's actually happening here, because I think a lot of people have heard the term compound interest, but don't really get what it means in practice. Here's the simplest way I can explain it. Compound interest is when your money makes money, and then that money makes money, and then that money makes money, and so on, forever, exponentially, without you lifting a finger. Let me walk you through a real example, month by month, so you can actually see this thing unfold. Month 1. You invest $300. At 10% annual returns, which breaks down to about 0.83% per month, your $300 grows to $302.50 by the end of the month. Okay, cool. You made $2.50. Not exactly exciting. Month 2. You add another $300. Now you've got $602.50 in there. That grows to about $607.50. You made $5 this month. Slightly better. Month 3, another $300. You're at $907.50. It grows to about $915. You made $7.50. You see what's happening? Every month, you're not just earning returns on the money you put in that month. You're earning returns on all the money that's already in there. And that includes all the gains you've already made. So your money is making money on top of money on top of money. Now, this starts slow, like painfully slow. For the first few years, you're watching your account grow and thinking, okay, this is nice, but it's not exactly changing my life. And that's the dangerous part, honestly, because most people quit right here. They don't see dramatic results fast enough, so they assume it's not working and they bail. But here's the thing about compound interest. It's backloaded. The magic happens in the later years. Let me show you what I mean. In year 1, if you're investing $300 a month at 10% annual returns, you'll end the year with about $3,770. You put in $3,600, you gained $170. Okay, neat. By year 10, you've put in $36,000 total, but your account is worth about $61,000. You've made $25,000 just from growth. That's pretty solid. By year 20, you've contributed $72,000, but your account is worth $206,000. You've made $134,000 in gains, more than you've actually put in. Now it's getting interesting. By year 30, you've put in $108,000, but you have $678,000. You've made $570,000 from compound growth alone. And here's the wildest part. In that 30th year alone, your account will grow by about $60,000. That's more than you put in during the entire first decade. You're doing the exact same thing every month, contributing $300, but the results are exponentially different because time is the most powerful ingredient in this recipe, and you can't get it back. So if this is all just math, and the math clearly works, why isn't everyone doing this? I've thought about this a lot, and honestly, I think it comes down to belief, or more specifically, the lack of belief that this could actually work for you. Because when you're looking at your bank account and you see $300 that you could invest, it doesn't feel like the first domino in a $1 million chain. It feels like $300. Like that's dinner out with friends. That's a new pair of shoes. That's less than your car payment. It doesn't feel significant enough to matter in the long run. And I get it. I really do. Our brains are wired to prioritize the immediate and tangible over the distant and abstract. $300 in your hand right now feels real. $688,000 in 30 years feels like a fantasy. Even if the math checks out, it's hard to emotionally connect with a future version of yourself that's 3 decades away. But here's the shift I think we need to make. That $300 isn't just $300. It's a seed. And yeah, a single seed doesn't look like much, but if you plant it in the right soil and give it enough time, it becomes a tree. And that tree produces fruit, and that fruit contains more seeds, and those seeds become more trees.
You're not just saving money. You're building a system that works while you sleep, while you're on vacation, while you're binge-watching Netflix at 2 a.m. You're creating a financial machine that compounds in the background of your life without requiring constant attention or effort. And I think once you internalize that, once you really believe that these small, boring, consistent actions add up to something massive, it changes how you think about money entirely. You stop seeing $300 a month as a sacrifice. You start seeing it as the price of admission to a completely different financial future. Okay, I know some of you are sitting there thinking, Nick, you keep saying 10% returns, like that's just a given, but is that realistic? Can I actually expect that? Fair question. Let me break it down. The S&P 500, which is basically a collection of the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the U.S., has historically returned about 10% per year on average over the long term. Some years it's up 30%. Some years it's down 20%. But if you zoom out and look at decades of data, the average lands around 10%. Now, does that mean you'll get exactly 10% every single year? No, absolutely not. The stock market is volatile. There will be years where you're down, and it's going to feel terrible. You're going to see your account balance drop, and your stomach is going to sink, and you're going to wonder if you made a huge mistake. But here's the thing. If you're investing for 30 or 40 years, those short-term fluctuations don't really matter. What matters is the long-term trend, and the long-term trend, historically, has been up. Let me give you some perspective. If you had invested in the S&P 500 at literally the worst possible time, right before the 2008 financial crisis, when the market was about to collapse, and you just held on and kept investing through the crash, you'd still be way up today, because the market recovered. It always has. I'm not saying it always will, because I can't predict the future, and neither can anyone else. But betting against the long-term growth of the global economy is, historically, a losing bet. Now, if 10% feels too aggressive or optimistic for you, that's fine. Run the numbers at 8% or 7%. You'll still end up with life-changing amounts of money. It'll just take a bit longer. At 8%, that $300 a month becomes about $447,000 in 30 years. At 7%, it's around $360,000, still way, way better than the $108,000 you'd have from just saving. The point isn't to obsess over the exact percentage. The point is that investing beats saving by such a massive margin that even conservative estimates are transformative. Here's a question I get a lot. Okay, Nick, this is great, but I'm not 25. I'm 35 or 45 or 55. Did I miss the boat? Short answer, no, you didn't. Longer answer, starting earlier is obviously better because you have more time for compounding to work its magic. But starting late is infinitely better than not starting at all. Let's say you're 40 years old and you're just now getting serious about investing. You've got 25 years until you're 65. If you invest $300 a month at 10% returns, you'll have about $354,000 at retirement. That's not $1 million, but it's also not nothing. That's a solid nest egg. That could be the difference between a comfortable retirement and a stressful one. And here's the other thing. You don't have to stop at $300. If you get a raise, if you pay off a car, if your kids move out and your expenses drop, you can increase your contributions. Even bumping it to $500 a month changes the math dramatically. At $500 a month for 25 years, you're looking at about $590,000. The worst thing you can do is look at where you are now, realize you're behind where you wish you were, and use that as an excuse to not start. Because every month you wait is a month of compounding you're giving up, and those months add up faster than you think. All right, so we've covered the math,
We've covered the mechanics, but honestly, the hardest part of this whole thing isn't the numbers, it's the psychology. Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to set up your automatic $300 monthly transfer. You're going to feel good about it for like 2 weeks, and then nothing's going to happen. Your account is going to grow slowly. Life is going to continue being expensive and chaotic, and you're going to be tempted constantly to stop.
Maybe you'll see something you really want to buy. Maybe you'll have an emergency and need to dip into your investments. Maybe the market will tank and you'll panic and pull everything out. Maybe you'll just forget about it because it's boring and there's no immediate payoff. This is where most people fail, not because they don't understand compound interest, but because they can't stick with it long enough to actually benefit from it. And I'm not going to lie to you, staying disciplined is hard. It requires you to prioritize future you over present you, month after month, year after year, with no fanfare and very little visible progress for a long time. But here's what I've learned. Discipline is way more valuable than excitement. Excitement fades, discipline compounds. The people who end up with $1 million aren't the ones who made one brilliant investment decision. They're the ones who made a boring, consistent decision every single month for decades. They automated their contributions so they didn't have to rely on willpower. They ignored the noise. They stayed the course. And that's the real secret, honestly. It's not sexy, it's not glamorous, but it works. Let's get practical for a second, because I know some of you are thinking, $300 a month sounds great, but I don't have $300 lying around. Okay, let's find it. What if you canceled one subscription you barely used, $15, made coffee at home 3 days a week instead of buying it, $20, packed lunch twice a week instead of eating out, $40, skipped one night out per month, $60, bought generic brands at the grocery store, $30, reduced your phone plan to something more reasonable, $25, sold stuff you don't use anymore on Facebook Marketplace, $50, used the library instead of buying books, $20, carpooled or used public transit one day a week, $40. That's $300 without making any drastic lifestyle changes, without feeling deprived, just by being slightly more intentional about where your money goes. Or maybe you can't find $300 right now. That's okay. Start with $100 or $50. The important thing is that you start, because $50 a month for 30 years at 10% is still $113,000. That's still life-changing compared to nothing. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent. All right, so let's pull all of this together. You started this video probably thinking that building serious wealth required a high income or perfect timing or some kind of insider knowledge. And what I hope you're realizing now is that it doesn't. It requires understanding a simple mathematical principle and having the patience to let it work. $300 a month is not a fortune. It's less than $10 a day. It's completely achievable for most people if they're willing to make small adjustments and commit to consistency. And yet, that tiny, boring amount of money, invested wisely and given enough time, becomes $678,000 or $1 million or more if you stick with it long enough. This isn't magic. It's not a secret. It's just compound interest doing what compound interest does. But the crazy thing is that most people will never experience this because they either don't know how it works, don't believe it will work for them, or don't have the discipline to stay consistent. And that's kind of tragic, honestly, because the opportunity's sitting right there, available to anyone with a brokerage account and a willingness to think long term. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just watch this video and nod along and then forget about it tomorrow. Actually do something. Open an investment account if you don't have one. Set up an automatic monthly transfer. Pick a simple index fund, and then let it run. You don't need to check it every day. You don't need to become a finance expert. You just need to trust the process and give it time. Because 30 years from now, future you is either going to be incredibly grateful that you started today or deeply regretful that you didn't. And the only person who gets to decide which one it is you, right now, with the next $300 you earn. So what's it going to be?